Hi, it's summertime, and on the North Fork and South Fork of Long Island, we have lots of fresh strawberries to use. So let's get to it. Today, we're going to make a delicious strawberry shortcake with biscuits and fresh strawberries from the North and South Fork of Long Island. I'm Selena, and I'm going to show you how. It's really simple. This is an activity you can get the kids in the kitchen with and have a lot of fun. So the first thing you're going to need are fresh strawberries. So get 2 pints of strawberries. And we're going to make a buttermilk that's going to help activate our biscuits with some regular milk and lemons. And then we're going to need some flour, some salt, and if you want to use baking powder, you can use that. But I'm going to tell you a little secret, a little tip I have about baking powder for you. But today I'm going to use baking soda. And then we're going to use a little dash of sugar and, like I said, some salt. So let's get started by making the dough for the biscuits. Before we do that, we're going to make the buttermilk and let it sit, because part of making the dough for a really good flaky biscuit is having a little bit of acid if you're using baking soda, because that helps activate the baking soda, and the more bubbles you have, the lighter and flakier your biscuit will be. And also we're using butter. There are some recipes that call for using any kind of lard, and some of those recipes are great. But today we're just going to stick with butter because I find it makes a flakier biscuit. Get your butter nice and cold. A fun activity that we can do is to grate a frozen bar of butter, because the smaller the pieces of your butter in your biscuit dough, the flakier your biscuit. The butter will melt and make little nooks and crannies because it naturally does have some water in it. So that will evaporate and make a little hole in the biscuit, which makes it more enjoyable to eat. Kind of like the way an English muffin is. So, like I said, we're going to start with making buttermilk. How do you make buttermilk? You can make buttermilk from a tablespoon of vinegar and a cup of milk, or a cup of milk and the half of a lemon, which is about a good tablespoon. So I'm going to get started and just squeeze this lemon into a little bowl, which, you know, if you have a juicer, you can use one. I have a juicer here, but I'm just going to go ahead and squeeze it because I'm going to show you how easy this is. Just squeeze your lemon over a bowl, and if you have any pits, just get a little spoon and take them out. So there you go. The lemon is squeezed. And I'm going to go ahead and pour it right into this cup. And that is a real big tablespoon. I would say it's probably like a tablespoon and a half, but that's just fine. It usually takes about a half a lemon. Then you're going to fill up the cup. This is what I like to do with your milk. We're going to use whole milk. And now you leave this and set it to the side. And it's going to curdle. And like I said, you can also use some vinegar for this if you don't have a lemon around. So we're going to let this curdle, and the acid in this is going to help activate the baking soda when we make the biscuits. So I'm going to put this to the side. And now we're going to make the dry ingredients and put them all together. So we're going to need 2 cups of flour. I got to get a clean cup. Let's see what I have here. It's in my bag. Okay, so you're going to level off a cup of flour and another cup of flour. There you go. Now we're going to save this flour to the side because we're going to need it for the board when we're ready to make the biscuits. And it's actually a lot of fun. So there we have that. Now I'm going to use about a half a tablespoon of baking soda. Sometimes it has little lumps in it, so you can break these up with your fingers and put that right in there. Then we're going to use a teaspoon and a half of salt. Here we go. Teaspoon and a half. That's that. Then we're going to take these dry ingredients and add a little bit of sugar. Now this can be up to you. I've made this with 2 tablespoons of sugar, and it's just great. If you like your biscuit a little bit sweeter, you can go for 3 tablespoons of sugar. So where is my sugar? Here we go. Let's do 2 tablespoons of sugar. And if you want a little bit more sweet, you can always dust your biscuits at the end with sugar. You put a little melted butter and some sugar on top. I'm going to put that to the side. Now let's check the milk. This is a fun experiment because you will see that with the lemon juice or vinegar, the milk, watch, this was the milk. It becomes thick. Now that's the acid that's curdling the milk, and that's going to make your biscuit extra tasty. So we're still going to put this to the side. I'm not ready for that yet because there's something magic that has to happen. Now this is a whisk. We're going to take this and whisk together the dry ingredients for the biscuits. And at about this time, you're going to preheat your oven to 400 degrees. And make sure you have a baking pan. I'm going to use one like this. I like to coat the bottom with a little bit of Crisco. You can use butter, but sometimes it burns a little around the edges. So if you have shortening, that works great. And not too thick, just a slight thin little coating. Now, I told you I was going to tell you about baking powder. Unfortunately, some baking powder, and it's really okay, but it has an ingredient that is actually, I got this to show you. There's an ingredient in our baking powder that is actually aluminum, sodium aluminum sulfate. Let me say that one more time. Sodium aluminum sulfate. And if you want to avoid aluminum in your diet, what you can do is make your own baking powder. And that's really simple. There's an ingredient called cream of tartar. And what you do is you put 2 teaspoons cream of tartar, 1 teaspoon baking soda, and 1 teaspoon of cornstarch. And I took it out to show you. Oh, here it is. That's a regular cornstarch you might use in some craft projects and things like that, like slime or whatever you might make. Well, if you put 2 teaspoons cream of tartar, 1 teaspoon baking soda, and 1 teaspoon cornstarch, you can make your own baking powder if you need that for a recipe. So just a little tip. But now I don't need it because I'm using baking soda, so I'm going to put this away. Most people use baking powder when they don't have an acid ingredient to make those fluffy, those little bubbles that come up when you use baking powder. You know, when you make pancakes, you'll see it when you stir the pancake. A lot of pancake mix has baking powder or baking soda. And baking powder needs that acid to make those little bubbles. So if you don't have lemon and you don't have vinegar, you're going to use baking powder. If you want to avoid aluminum, take the recipe I just gave you and use that. Now I'm using baking soda, so I'm going to use my lemon or my vinegar to make that reaction. And it's a fun experiment that you can do is put a cup of water and a tablespoon of baking soda in and watch for the bubbles. That's another way that you can tell that your baking soda is fresh. Just a little trick. So now we have our dry ingredients here, and you want to use really cold butter because the little tiny pieces of butter are what are going to all go through the biscuits and make them nice and flaky, like I said. But if you get it too warm and you mash your dough too much, the biscuits are not light and flaky. They're very heavy and kind of gummy. So we want to avoid that. So this is a pastry blender. And you can go ahead and mash in your butter with a pastry blender, but if you don't have that at home, you can also use 2 forks to kind of just break up your butter. Or I've done this too. You can use a little butter knife and just cut up your butter in tiny pieces and then cut into it in the bowl. Today, I'm going to just cut up the butter in little pieces. We're going to use 6 tablespoons of butter. Now on your butter wrapper, you'll see that it's sectioned out, the tablespoons right on there. So you're going to use 6 tablespoons. So you can just cut the butter to that much. And then if it's frozen butter, you can actually grate it with a grater and make tiny little pieces. But I'm not using frozen butter today. So I'm just going to take my knife with my cold butter and put in little pieces right in here, 6 tablespoons. If you like extra buttery, you can go ahead and make it 7. That's really okay. All right, so now I'm going to take my pastry blender and just get this butter incorporated into this flour and salt and sugar. And I know the video is shaking, but it's a low budget operation that I'm running here. Okay, so I'm going to cut in the butter. You want to try to not use your hands on this because, like I said, it will make it less flaky. So if it sticks to the pastry blender or your knife, just take it off with a fork. Now we're cutting in the butter before we're adding in the buttermilk. Why is that? Well, it's because we're going to make sure that the butter stays nice and flaky. And if I put the milk in first, then the butter would get more mushy because then the dough would be mushier. So I'm going to go until the butter is like tiny little peas, like really tiny little peas. It's tiny bits like this one. Let me get it separate. Do you see that little lump? Like that. So the butter is in here. And then now I'm going to see what my buttermilk looks like. Let's check it out. Remember, this was just milk. Now it's buttermilk. So we're going to put in the cup of buttermilk. And this is the part that's super. Now make sure you have clean hands, okay? Let me move that to the side. Now we're going to put some flour on your cutting board. A good handful of flour, okay? And now spread that onto your cutting board. It's okay if you want to use a little bit more. All right, I'm going to move my strawberries to the side. I'll get back to those. So your cutting board's got flour on it. Here's the dough that we just added the milk to. What you want to do is you want to fold this milk and this butter in like this. You're going to want to make it very delicate. Fold it really slow and make it nice and soft, because the more tender and less worked your dough is, the flakier your biscuit. So now you're going to see the consistency of the dough is like lumps. Take a look. I'll show you again. See that? That's your dough. Okay? So you're going to want to incorporate that flour just so it comes together. Don't mix it too much, just fold it in, fold it in. Now, you can get a nice clean glass to cut your biscuits. You can make your biscuits in squares, or if you have a biscuit cutter, you can use your biscuit cutter. So I'm going to use the biscuit cutter, and I'm going to show you how you can use a nice clean glass as well. So here's a glass, and you just turn it over and you can cut your biscuits with your glass, depending on how big you want your biscuit. Now I'm going to take this tender dough batter and put it right out into a lot of flour because you don't want it to stick. So I'm going to turn this right out. Just like this, you want to get all those little bits. You only have one shot to do it. Okay. So you don't want to get your hot hands on it, so use these paddles as much as you can, your spatulas. Now, I want to put some flour on my hands, on my clean hands, and gently take this dough and shape your biscuit dough. What you want to do is make sure that your biscuit dough can remain nice and tender. See it? It's just kind of falling apart, and I'm going to be really gentle with it. I'm not going to roll it. I'm just going to take it and gather it together and pat it down, just slightly pat it down. Now you are going to get about 6 biscuits out of this recipe, 6 big biscuits. So I'm just taking this dough and I'm patting it down gently, letting it all come together. putting some flour on my head while I'm at it. I'm going to have to wipe that off. Hey, it's part of baking, right? So gently pat down your dough and get the flour off your head. Okay. This is the fun part because it's a really gentle way that you get this dough ready. See? Now you have your pan over here. You're going to want to get your pan ready because now you're taking your lightly coated pan and we're going to get these biscuits into the oven. Then we're going to get our strawberries and our whipped cream ready. So here we go. It's about, I would say, just shy of an inch thick. You can make thicker biscuits, however you like it. We're going to make it just shy of an inch thick. Big biscuits. With this cutter, I'm getting about 6 good biscuits with some left over. So this leftover dough, you can do 2 things. You can leave the little edges from the biscuits, leave the little square intact and enjoy that with a little butter in the morning just for fun, like a little fun shape. Or you can just gather it together again. And this time I'm just going to press it because those were the ends. The less handiwork, the better. And I can make another 2 to 3 biscuits out of this with this shaper. So I'm going to put these to the side to cook later. You can even freeform a biscuit with your hands. Just the palm of your hands, like this. You don't want to shape it too much. Nice and delicate. And now they're going to go into the oven for 12 minutes. So set your timers and let's put this in. 12 minutes. So take a look at the time, write it on a piece of paper or set your kitchen timer. So let's see. 12 minutes. All right, I got that. So now we're going to go on to the next step. I'm just going to clean off this counter a little bit. And now we're going to macerate our strawberries. Now, macerate is a word that means getting the juice out and the flavor out and making a nice frothy juice so that when you go to make your strawberry shortcake, it tastes really nicely jammy and not so clean. Now, if you like a clean taste, you're just going to take your strawberries and slice them, and that's great. But if you want a jammier taste, we're going to put a little bit of sugar and a little bit of lemon into the strawberries. So I'm going to get the rest of my lemon that we used for the biscuit dough, and we're just going to squeeze about another tablespoon of lemon juice into about 2 pints of strawberries. So I'm going to get about a tablespoon of lemon juice and just take your strawberry and put your spoon right here, kind of dig it into the center and just give it one little turn around and you've hulled your strawberry. So we have 2 pints of strawberry we're going to take care of. And then the next thing you're going to do is decide how much sugar you want to add. So one of the things you can do is just leave it simple and plain, like I said, for a really fresh taste. Or you can add about 2 tablespoons of sugar, and then that's going to give it a nice jammy texture, and it'll come together and it'll look really pretty on your biscuit. So I'm going to get these strawberries together, and it's really important that when you take local strawberries into your home, you use them right away, because if you're like me, sometimes you forget and then you're wondering, what's that weird smell in my kitchen? What's happening? And they're already going bad. So that's the great thing about local food. You have to use it while it's delicious and while it's ready. And so when you're strawberry picking or out in the farm stands, you can just take these strawberries and make a nice strawberry shortcake with all of your pints of strawberries. And then you can also take, whatever's extra and left over and use it for pancakes. When you're putting together the strawberries in this fashion with the lemon and the sugar, they keep for a longer time in your refrigerator as well. Just put it in a covered little plastic bowl or little glass bowl with a cover on it, or maybe some saran wrap on top, and they'll keep really well. So there we go. Now I'm almost done with all my strawberries, and then this is the part any kid can do. You just take a little butter knife and just cut your strawberries in about 4 pieces each. Put them in a bowl, and then that's what we're going to add the sugar and the lemon juice to. So you want to just go down about 4 or 5 times depending on the thickness of your strawberry and make a nice piece, a nice long piece. I'll show you one when I get it here. Just like that. So there we go. And the next thing we're going to do is make some whipped cream. But if you don't have heavy cream at home, or anything that you can use for whipped cream, that might be a half and half heavy cream mix. If that's what you have in your refrigerator, you can do that. What you can use is just the canned whipped cream, the good old whipped cream, or even Cool Whip. That works really good. So we've got the strawberries all cut up. And then the next thing we're going to do is put in some sugar. So we'll put in 2 tablespoons of sugar. And remember, we put a tablespoon of lemon juice into that wonderful strawberry bowl. So here we go. That's good enough. And now let's put our sugar. Get your tablespoon measure, put your 2 tablespoons of sugar. And then in the time it takes for the biscuits to cook, the strawberries will be macerated, which means the juices will come out. And I'll even show you what that starts to look like. It's amazing how quickly it starts. So you'll see it's turning nice and syrupy. And the lemons and the sugar is just pulling out the juices from the strawberries. And that's a really good topping for strawberry shortcake. So I'm keeping my eye on the time. And now we have time to make a little whipped cream. When you're making whipped cream from heavy cream, you want to make sure your heavy cream is nice and cold. So I just got it from the refrigerator. Here you go. Like to use organic when we can, right? So you're going to use 2 cups of heavy cream and powdered sugar, 2 tablespoons of powdered sugar. So we'll take 2 cups of heavy cream. It's about a pint, but there's some extra. So you can save that for something else. And then I'll get the powdered sugar. And we're just going to use 2 tablespoons of powdered sugar. And I like to use vanilla, so I'm going to go and grab my vanilla. Here we are. Use a teaspoon of vanilla. Let's see. Here we are. Perfect. I love a nice touch of vanilla in whipped cream. You can certainly use whipped cream with no sugar or vanilla and just make it really, really plain and simple. But I think a teaspoon of vanilla and that powdered sugar is great. And now there's 2 ways you can do this. You can give the kids a whisk and say, okay, start whisking. And just whisk and whisk and whisk. And that'll take like probably a good 5 minutes before the whipped cream starts. So I'm going to show you a little bit of how simple it is to make whipped cream. Just keep going, make sure it's nice and cold. And after a short period of time, it does begin to get a little fluffy. But today, since we need to think about time, I'm going to go ahead and use the blender. I mean my mixer. Okay, let me put this in here. Hey, so this is just fighting with me a little bit. Let me get this in here. You can go through. So now you want to put it on medium. It should take about 2 minutes. You're going to want to whisk until you can see stiff peaks in the bowl, and I'll show you just how short of a time that is. Believe it or not, it's almost ready. See that? Not ready yet. We're going to wait for stiff peaks. Another 1.5 to 2 minutes. At this point, it's thick enough so you can turn it up high. Okay, here is a stiff peak for whipped cream. That's it, whipped cream. I'll show it to you on a spoon. And the fun part is, once you unplug this and release, you can share these. It's a great little fun thing I used to always have when I was younger. Little whipped cream. So there you go. And this time, let's check those biscuits. And they're done. Okay. Using your oven mitt, take them out. Let them cool to the side. And I'll show you beautiful, perfect biscuits that you just made. Ready for strawberries and whipped cream. Okay. So now we're going to put it all together. Get a plate. I think I'll use this one. And ideally, you would just let these biscuits cool for a good 5 minutes to 15 minutes, depending on if you want a warm biscuit or cool biscuit. But I'm going to go ahead and do this now so you can take a look and see what it looks like. Beautiful biscuit. Perfectly browned. And you just take it and take your spatula and just slice it in half. It should be nice and flaky on the outside. and nice and tender and crumbly on the inside. See? That's a good biscuit. And now you get a nice spoon, put some whipped cream and some of these beautiful strawberries with syrup right on top. So it looks something like this. And then a little bit more whipped cream on top of the next layer, if you like. And some more strawberries. And that is strawberry shortcake for Father's Day or any day in the summer. I hope you like this recipe. Go to Montauk Library's blog for kids and you'll find it right there. It's Selina.